Welcome to Your Dose of Wowness. Right now, I want you to imagine standing in the middle of the Namib Desert. You're on the southwestern coast of Africa, surrounded by one of the absolute oldest, driest, and most unforgiving landscapes on the planet. The sun is just punishing. The earth around you is this sweeping, endless expanse of reddish sand and sparse, dry grass. But as you look out toward the horizon, the landscape is broken. It's totally fractured by perfect, barren circles. They look like clearings. They look incredibly deliberate, and there aren't just a few of them.
Just think about the sheer absurd scale of this for a second. We are talking about millions of these perfect circles stretching across a narrow strip of land that runs for 2,500 kilometers, down from Angola all the way through Namibia and into South Africa. If you were flying over it, it's this staggering, endless honeycomb. Millions of identical voids stamped right into the barren African sand. And the crazy thing, no human made them. No machine made them.
If you're actually standing right there on the ground, the physical experience is jarring. You take one step inside the circle and it's just bare, red sand. You take one step outside and you're suddenly standing in a ring of green, vibrant grass that's actually noticeably taller than the grass just 50 meters away. The boundary is sharp, it's absolute. The effect gives you this kind of physical vertigo. It feels exactly like standing in a room with no walls and no ceiling, but the space itself is perfectly defined. You are standing in an environment engineered by something you completely cannot see.
Now, the spacing is the absolute mathematical heart of this mystery. These circles aren't just randomly scattered like seeds thrown in the wind. They maintain roughly equal distances from each other across enormous areas. In mathematics, this is called a hyperdispersed spatial pattern. That basically means the circles actively avoid clustering. They physically repel each other, keeping a really strict minimum distance over thousands of square kilometers. It's almost like they know exactly where the others are.
That undeniable spatial regularity begs one really urgent question. Who designed the rooms? The indigenous sand people actually call them the footprints of the gods. But for the last 50 years, a fierce, all-out scientific war has been raging over who or what engineered this impossible grid. It's easily been one of the most hotly contested mysteries in modern biology.
This quickly escalated into a two-front biological war. On one side, we have the termite engineers. On the other side, we have the thirsty grass. Those became the two leading explanations, the biological maintenance workers versus the brutal, mechanical reality of plant survival. And for decades, the tension was absolute, because both sides were kind of right, but neither side had the full picture.
Let's look at the insect side first. The really crucial point for the termite theory is physical presence. Sand termites, specifically a species called Samotermes alloceras, are consistently found living in the soil right beneath these circles. Their galleries stretch across the barren patch. They actually consume the plant roots within the circle, essentially acting like tiny biological maintenance workers weeding a garden. They clear the ground so any rain sinks deep down into the sand, making an underground reservoir for their colony. Honestly, it's a super elegant, incredibly logical explanation.
But then you have to counter that with the plant theory. Botanists look at this environment, a place getting a measly 50 to 150 millimeters of rain a year, and they just see a brutal war for water. They argue that in hyper-arid conditions like this, plants hoard moisture. Those taller grass rings on the edges, they're hoarding the water that naturally drains from the bare interior. So the plants are basically doing this to themselves. That intense root competition creates uniform barren gaps, completely without the need for a central brain or some master termite architect.
So we hit this ultimate scientific deadlock. The scientific community was genuinely divided. Both theories had real physical evidence right there in the field, but neither of them could explain the whole phenomenon. I mean, the termite theory couldn't explain why insect colonies would somehow space themselves out with perfect, completely uncommunicative mathematical precision. And the plant theory, it really struggled to explain why the termites were constantly, undeniably there.
And that brings us to the raw power of modern technology. In 2022, a researcher named Stefan Getzen and his team deployed an AI-assisted machine learning scan. And they didn't just look at a couple of fields. They analyzed thousands of kilometers of satellite imagery, sweeping across the entire geographic range of this phenomenon. They literally taught an artificial intelligence to identify boundaries, measure dimensions, and crunch the spatial statistics of millions of individual circles.
What the AI found was geographically devastating to the old debate. See, back in 2016, fairy circles were discovered outside of Africa for the very first time, out in the Pilbara region of Australia. The AI analyzed the Australian circles and the Namibian circles and found they were quantitatively indistinguishable. It was the exact same mathematical pattern, separated by 10,000 kilometers of ocean. But here is the massive, totally undeniable catch. Australia has absolutely zero sand termites. The one insect the first theory completely relies on, it simply doesn't exist there.
I really want to read you that definitive AI verdict verbatim, straight from the findings. The AI showed that the spatial statistics match plant self-organization models perfectly. The conclusion? The circles are doing mathematics. The termites are just bystanders, or at best, they're maintenance workers living in a building they absolutely did not design. This pattern is mathematical, not entomological.
Section 1. The Epiphany. Alan Turing's Desert Code.
To truly grasp what's happening here, we actually have to travel back to mid-century England. In 1952, Alan Turing, yes, the exact same guy who broke the Enigma code and essentially fathered modern computing, published a paper called The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis. But he wasn't writing about computers. He was asking a massive, fundamental biological question. How does nature create regular spatial patterns out of a completely uniform starting state? Like, how does a zebra know exactly where to put its stripes? How does a leopard know where its spots go?
Turing proposed a mathematical rule which we now call the Turing pattern. He proved mathematically that you don't actually need a designer. You just need two interacting forces, an activator and an inhibitor. Really simple mathematical rules of competition and diffusion can spontaneously generate complex, highly regular designs in nature without a single shred of external instruction.
It turns out the plants in the sand are running Alan Turing's exact program. Vegetation is the activator. Where grass establishes itself, it shades the soil, draws water, and promotes its own growth. But by draining that water, it simultaneously acts as an inhibitor to any grass trying to grow right next to it. The grass promotes itself and starves its neighbor. That resulting bare patch? That's the fairy circle. The uniform spacing between the circles is determined completely by the ratio of those two forces. The plants themselves are doing Turing's math.
Just think about this timeline for a second. It is unbelievable. In 1952, Alan Turing publishes his computing theory on paper. Decades pass. The scientific war completely rages on. Then, in 2016, the missing piece of the puzzle is found out in the Australian outback. And finally, in 2022, artificial intelligence looks down from space and definitively confirms it. It literally took 70 years and orbiting satellites to prove a 1952 computing theory on a massive biological scale.
Alan Turing wrote his code in 1952, but the Namib Desert has been running this exact program for millions of years. The fairy circles of Namibia might genuinely be the largest Turing pattern on planet Earth. And that's not a metaphor. That is raw, unyielding mathematics hard-coded right into the very crust of our planet.
And that brings us to day 40. 40 days of posting an explainer every single day. Stepping back from the sheer vastness of the Namib Desert to right here, right now, with all of you. Looking at these massive patterns really reminds me of what we're building here together. Every single view, every comment, every person who comes back the next day for another question, it builds something slowly and steadily. And I am so grateful for every part of it. It keeps this explainer going, and it truly means more than you know. So please subscribe. We are here every day, turning the world's most incredible mysteries into things we can actually understand. But it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If a barren desert can run ancient mathematical code, what other environments are quietly calculating beneath our feet? Thank you for building this with me. I'll see you tomorrow.